Hello, boys and girls. So we are now continuing with our second session. As I told you that every alternate day will be coming up with a session. So if you, we'll just quickly revise what did we do in the first lecture. In the first lecture, we discussed the provisions of section 16, where we talked about the eligibility and entitlement of input tax credit. We also discussed what is input tax credit. If you remember that example of with ITC, without ITC, वो एक table हमने discuss किया था. Thereafter, we discussed provisions of the eligibility of input tax credit, that every registered person is entitled to claim input tax credit in respect of all goods or services which he is using in the course of furtherance of business. If you also remember that we discussed conditions which are associated to section 16, that is 16 subsection 2, जहाँ पे हम लोगों को बोला था he should be in possession of an invoice, he should have received the goods or services, he should have filed the returns, he should have paid the taxes. Then there were the explanations to section 16 to be जहाँ पे हमने bill to ship के बारे में बात किया था. Then we talk about the provisos which are associated with that regarding the goods being received in lots or installment. Then the goods which are where the payment is not made within 180 days. What is the consequence if it is not made within 180 days? उसके बाद क्या होगा? And we also discussed a couple of 16 subsection 2 clause AA and 16 subsection 2 clause BA. So 16 to AA was about the emphasis that the supplier who is giving me a B2B supply, his supply should be visible to me in the GST returns. I told you about the GSTR 2B, but I also said कि हम लोग ये GSTR 2B के बारे में जब returns के बारे में बात करेंगे, that time we are going to discuss in detail. And then section 16 subsection 2 clause BA, again the newly inserted clause where we discussed that okay, if the credit what has been shown to me in my GSTR to be, it should also be a non-restricted credit. मतलब restricted credit है तो मुझे credit वहाँ पे input tax credit नहीं मिलेगा. Again I told you that when we file the actually see the portal, the GST portal, we are going to specifically discuss what do you mean by restricted credit, what do you mean by a credit which is not a restricted credit. And therefore इसी recap के बाद let us begin with our session today. Now we are going to first discuss the provision of section 16 subsection 3, that is again eligibility and entitlement. So friends, today's discussion, after today's discussion we are going to discuss a few question and answers only on section 16. So आज हम लोग ये lecture में section 17 को हाथ नहीं लगाने वाले. This is going to be a relatively smaller lecture. So first and the second lecture मिला के आपका provision of section 16 is going to be completed. We are going to discuss a few question and answers which are based on this. We will discuss a few MCQs which are based on this provision of section 16. Okay. Now, where section 16 subsection 3 क्या बोलता है देखो, where the registered person has claimed depreciation on the component of tax, the cost of capital goods and the plant and machinery under the provisions of Income Tax Act 1961, comma, the input tax credit on the said component shall not be allowed. Said tax component shall not be allowed. Once again, we'll read the statutory wordings. Where the registered person has claimed depreciation. Depreciation कहाँ पे आता है? So one you must have seen in Income Tax Act also. You must have seen in Companies Act also. But this provision has got a specific relevance only with section 32 of the Income Tax Act. So where the registered person has claimed depreciation on the tax component of the cost of capital goods and plant and machinery under the provisions of Income Tax Act 1961, the input tax credit on said tax component shall not be allowed. Friends, what इसका meaning क्या है? एकदम simple terms में let's try to understand. Okay. Now, what is this trying to tell you? Okay. So इन लोग क्या बोलते हैं आपको, that suppose we have a scenario where we are willing to claim input tax credit in respect of some asset that we are buying, and if you're also willing to claim a depreciation on that asset, then how the dealing is going to happen, that is what this provision is all about. So let's try to understand. Okay. So let's say that there is a machine. Okay. So let's say that there is a machine. Just let me create some space for us. So let's say that there is some machine that we are willing to buy. फॉन्ट साइज तो सर इतना छोटा है कि आपको क्या, मुझे भी कुछ नहीं दिख रहा है. सो आई थिंक वी शुड इंक्रीज. इट्स नॉट येट इंक्रीज, so we'll again increase the font size. Okay. So now let's say that we have purchased a machine, okay, and ये machine को हम लोग खरीदते हैं for a price of rupees 10 lakhs. This machine we are willing to, I mean, we have purchased rather for a price of rupees 10 lakhs. Okay, now finally we have reached that point where we have cracked the code. So machine का price 10 lakh rupees है. Let's say that the IGST on this machinery is at the rate of 18%. IGST on this machinery is at the rate of 18%. So if IGST is 18%, now what the provisions of 16 subsection 3 very specifically tells you that if you are willing to claim depreciation on the tax component of this fixed asset, on the tax component of this machinery, so if you are willing to claim depreciation on the tax component of the machinery, then you will not be entitled for input tax credit. Otherwise, your entitlement of input tax credit is only if you do not claim the depreciation on the tax component under the income tax act. So here is machine जब हम लोग खरीदेंगे, what entry we are going to pass in the books of account? So the entry will pass will be machinery account debit 10 lakhs, input IGST account debit input IGST account debit 1 lakh 80,000 to suppliers account 11 lakh 80,000. So friends, either what we are able to see that now machinery account, now this is going to go in your balance sheet, ये fixed assets में चले जाएगा. Input IGST account is, as I told you, it acts like your prepaid tax. So this is prepaid tax. So this is also a part of your, of your current assets. ये तो आपका fixed asset में चले गया. So this is a balance sheet item. This is a fixed asset balance sheet item. And this supplier account is, this is your creditors account. Now, tomorrow if you want to claim a depreciation on this machinery at the rate of 10%, let's suppose, for the purpose of understanding, 10% per. So, if machine depreciation has to be put, I mean, charged on this machinery, what entry will pass? Depreciation account debit. Depreciation account debit. So, let's say we are assuming it is 10%. So, मेरा 1 lakh depreciation हो गया to machinery account 1 lakh. So now what the provision is telling you, let's try to just see those wordings once again. Where the registered person has claimed depreciation on the tax component of the capital goods and a plant and machinery under the provisions of Income Tax Act, the input tax rate on the said tax component shall not be allowed. So यहाँ पे what the law is now trying to tell you that first करो ऐसा situation होता है that you end up actually claiming depreciation on full value of the fixed asset, meaning thereby ये बोल रहा है सपोज अगर आपने ऐसा किया, ओके, ये बोल रहा है सपोज आपने ऐसा किया, let's say that okay, sorry, I just missed out on that text portion of it. Okay, nonetheless, so what this is saying that suppose it happens so like you claim you claim depreciation on an amount which is inclusive of tax. So let's say that you are recording this machine in your books of accounts. Let's say you are recording this machine in your books of account at the amount of rupees 11 lakh 80,000 means आप input tax credit claim नहीं करते हो. Instead of that, you are recording the machinery account debit directly आप कर रहे हो 11 lakh 80,000. Now in such case, depreciation आप कितना compute करोगे? If 10% is the depreciation rate, then what is going to be your depreciation amount in such case? Tell me. Of course, it is going to be 11 lakh 80,000 का 10%. So 1 lakh 18,000 हो जाएगा वो. आपका जो depreciation है, which will be 11 lakh 80,000 का 10%, that will be 1,18,000. Here, how much depreciation you have claimed? You could claim because machinery account was debited only by 10 lakh rupees. So the depreciation rate हम लोग ने बोला है that the rate of depreciation that we have taken is the rate of depreciation that we have taken is 10%. Now see, just try to understand 16 subsection 3. This is what is 16 subsection 3. 16 subsection 3 is more like when it will not be eligible. So when input tax credit on the machinery or the fixed assets will not, or the capital goods will not be eligible, if you are willing to claim a depreciation on even on the tax component of the capital goods, जैसे कि अगर आपने मशीनरी को बुक्स में कैपिटलाइज ही किया आईजीएसटी के अमाउंट इंक्लूड करके 10 lakhs plus 1,80,000 to put together, if your fixed asset amount is only going to be 11,80,000, then you will not be entitled to claim input tax credit because आप depreciation की कौन से अमाउंट पे क्लेम कर रहे हो? You're going to claim a depreciation on amount which is inclusive of the IGST amount. You're going to claim the depreciation on the amount which is inclusive of the IGST amount. Therefore, you're not going to be entitled for claiming the input tax credit. मतलब लॉ क्या बोलता है? सिंपल है बॉस. Don't claim depreciation under the Income Tax Act at of rupees 1,18,000. एंड देन यू विल कम टू जीएसटी एंड से दैट नहीं नहीं मुझे तो एक्चुअली यहाँ पे इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट भी 1 लाख रुपए का चाहिए प्लस मैं इनकम टैक्स में भी डेप्रिसिएशन 1,18,000 का क्लेम करूंगा. ऐसा नहीं चलेगा. Now I'll also give you a counter provision here from the Income Tax Act. So 30 section 32 explanation to section 32 of the Income Tax Act also says that the amount has to be, if the depreciation calculation will be on an amount which is calculated net of tax. वहां पे इनकम टैक्स एक्ट में बोला है that depreciation will be calculated on amount which is net of tax. Means if you are recording the tax separately, depreciation will be only on the base value of the asset. So it is your choice. If you are willing to claim a depreciation on full value of the fixed asset, no problem. It is completely your right, your choice. You claim a depreciation of 1,18,000 under Income Tax Act. Input tax credit claim करने नहीं मिलेगा. If you are willing to claim if you are willing to claim input tax credit in this case, 1 lakh will be your depreciation in such case because it will be calculated only on rupees 10 lakhs, which is the value net of your GST amount. So 16 subsection 3 को एक बार summarize करते हैं. Where the registered person has claimed depreciation on the tax component of capital goods and plant and machinery under the provisions of Income Tax Act, the input tax credit on the said tax component shall not be allowed. Why? Like I told you, if you want to claim depreciation on an amount inclusive of GST, do go and claim, but ITC nahi milega. If you want to claim input tax credit, then you are very much entitled to claim input tax credit provided you record the fixed asset at a value net of taxes. So अगर आपको net of taxes value पे record करना है तो आप ये option में जा सकते हो. If you want to, you are not interested in claiming input tax credit, you can go for this option. Now जैसे जैसे हम लोग थोड़ा ये subject में आगे बढ़ेंगे, I'll tell you who will choose not to claim the credit, who will choose to claim the credit. ये एक aspect मैं आपको तभी बताऊंगा. Right now, it is not really that necessary to discuss in detail. Therefore, we are going to move forward. So, boys and girls, I hope this point is very clear to you what this provision exactly means. Now, we'll move to the last provision of section 16, which is 16 subsection 4. Now, what does 16 subsection 4 tell you? A registered person shall not be entitled to claim input tax credit in respect of any invoice or a debit note for supply of goods or services or both after the due date of the furnishing of the return under section 39 for the month of September following the end of the financial year to which such invoice or invoice relating to debit note pertains to. Now friends, ये provision यहाँ पे जो दिख रहा है ये थोड़ा सा आउटडेटेड है एट दिस पॉइंट. व्हाट आई विल डू इज दैट फर्स्टली ये 16 सबसेक्शन 4 को हम लोग थोड़ा सा पार्क करने वाले हैं. व्हाई पार्क करने वाले हैं? इट इज गॉट समथिंग टू डू विद फाइलिंग ऑफ रिटर्न्स, ड्यू डेट ऑफ फाइलिंग ऑफ रिटर्न्स, व्हिच करंटली वी आर नॉट रियली अवेयर ऑफ. So what I will do is that I will tell you that what is the maximum time now under the amended provisions of the law. I am repeating, under the amended provisions of the law. Unfortunately अभी जो notes में आपके सामने है वो provision का उतना part amend नहीं हुआ है. So I am telling you that under the amended provisions of the law, this maximum time limit for claiming credit under 16 subsection 4 has been increased to 30th day of November or date of filing of annual returns, whichever is earlier. But because currently we are not aware what do you mean by the annual return or what do you mean by the monthly returns, that's why मैं 16 subsection 4 को फिलहाल बाजू में पार्क करने वाला हूँ. When we come to the returns chapter, definitely I'll bring you back here that why this maximum time limit has been considered so. So ये September वाला जो चीज है, anyways if you'll see now for me attempt and all, this will be not applicable. So the new date is that the credit can be claimed latest by 30th day of November following the end of the financial year or date of filing of annual return, whichever is earlier. So now section 16, that is eligibility of input tax credit, is ready. Eligibility of input tax credit is done. So what we are going to do, थोड़ा सा एक MCQs का round ले लेते हैं and फटाफट let's try to see how much we know by now. Just hold on for a second. Okay, now let's see the questions. Like I told you that we'll go through a set of questions. Yes. Okay. Is it recommendatory to capitalize the capital goods in the books of account? Nah, yes, no, optional, or none of the above. Now, see, as far as the taxation law is concerned, there is nothing that the tax law decides whether you can capitalize or not. It's more on the accounting to decide. So maybe there is some, as I mean, there is some capital goods or there is some machinery which may be like an input to me, but it may be like a fixed asset for somebody else. So I'll give you a small example over here. Now let's say that I am a person who is dealing in installation of security camera systems. So for security camera installation system, I am bound to buy a couple of computer sets which are going to be installed along with my system. So when I buy those, I am not going to record them as capital goods because मेरे लिए तो वो as a part of goods are coming from into my company which are going to go and get sold along with my systems. Or if I alternatively say that okay, in my office I have purchased two computers, then I'm going to say okay, it's like a fixed asset, so I need to capitalize it. So is it recommendatory to capitalize the capital goods in the books of account? Here the answer is going to be optional. That is whether it is recommendatory or not, it is going to be optional depending upon the industry. Whether the credit on capital goods can be taken immediately on receipt of goods, the answer is yes. After capitalizing, I mean yes, no, after use of such capital goods, after capitalizing in the books of account. Whether the credit can be taken immediately on receipt of capital goods, so here the more correct answer will be yes, but after capitalizing in the books of accounts. So D will be the answer. Whether it is necessary. Now one may ask कि ये question में अपन ने C क्यों नहीं किया, that why after usage. If you remember, we said goods or services which are used or intended to be used in the course or furtherance of business. I may not use the asset, but it is there, so I'm going to capitalize it and then I'm going to claim the credit. Whether it is, where is it necessary to capitalize? I mean, capitalize the capital goods in the books of account. I think here only the use of goods is, I mean sorry, only the necessity define होता है क्या, तो हम लोग ने recommendation में तो आंसर दिया तो optional है. So whether it is necessary, it is not necessary to capitalize them in the books of accounts. But the problem is that this question is asked that whether it is necessary to capitalize the capital goods in the books of accounts. Now here capital goods हमारे लिए वो capital goods है या capital goods नहीं है, that is one question. Secondly, what is the treatment that we are going to give to those goods when we are going to use them, or when we are going to use them as capital goods in our business. So whether it is necessary to capitalize the capital goods in the books of account, so in my view the answer is going to be it is necessary to recognize them as capital goods. Means अगर आप उसको कैपिटल गुड्स करके क्रेडिट लेना चाहते हो तो ऑफ कोर्स इट इज नेसेसरी. ऊपर का क्वेश्चन था इज इट रिकमेंडेटरी. रिकमेंडेशन मींस now whether I am suggestive to that extent, it may be, we said that okay, we need to leave it optional because I said if it may a capital good for me or it is not. But whereas third question is more direct on whether it is necessary. If I'm calling something as a capital goods, is it necessary to capitalize them in the books of account? Then the answer is yes. Whether the credit on input should be availed based on the receipt of documents or receipt of goods. So if you remember 16 subsection 2 में डॉक्यूमेंट, ही शुड बी इन पोजेशन ऑफ इनवॉइस और डॉक्यूमेंट्स और एनी अदर, आई मीन एनी अदर टैक्स पेइंग डॉक्यूमेंट्स भी बोला था. ही शुड बी इन रिसिप्ट ऑफ गुड्स और सर्विसेज भी बोला था. सो इट इज नेसेसरी टू रिसीव द गुड्स, इट इज नेसेसरी टू गेट द डॉक्यूमेंट्स ऑल्सो. सो receipt of goods, receipt of document, both is the correct answer. C, both will be the correct answer in such case. Okay, now we'll see the next one, the next question. Okay, so here what we can see, can the recipient avail input tax credit for the part payment of the amount to the supplier within 180 days? Now, can the recipient avail input tax credit for the part payment of the amount to the supplier within 180 days? Now, here that rule is something that we have not yet discussed, but let me just quickly tell you. The rule says that whichever is the proportion that you have paid within 180 days, to that extent you will be entitled for claiming credit. Unpaid portion after at the end of 180 days, you will not be entitled to retain that credit. So यहाँ पे yes, but proportionately to the extent of value and tax paid, C is the correct answer. But like I said that yes, we need to discuss that rules when we are going to discuss the CGST rules relating to input tax credit. That is by the end of this chapter only. I'll let you know what exactly it is. But for the while, just take that answer as C. Whether depreciation on the tax component of capital goods and plant and machinery, and whether input tax credit is permissible. Now, whether depreciation on tax component of capital goods and plant and machinery is allowed, and whether input tax credit is permissible. So 16 subsection 3 we did it in this lecture only. So input tax credit is eligible if depreciation on tax component is not availed. C is the most appropriate answer over here. Okay. Now, friends, if you remember that yesterday also, what we did was we did some question and answers which were there at the end of it, which were more like numerical questions, right? So we'll just try to see if anything of those is of use to us today. Otherwise, what we're going to do is that we'll try to get some questions again in the next lecture, and we are going to create then a blend of some questions. I'll also take it a point that in the sessions which will be there will be genuine solving of questions that we are going to do right on the screen. So on that day particularly, we are going to take up the questions from past examinations, recent examinations, and we are going to solve them exactly to get the idea how the exam questions are going to be. So with these few questions that we have discussed, I'll also request you that सिर्फ section 16 के ऊपर to the extent possible try to get some insight, try to get some questions, so I mean try to get some questions solved, refer the institute study material only for section 16. The rules which are associated as I mentioned and section 16 subsection 4, ये दोनों चीजें हमने फिलहाल पाक किया हुआ है. We are just going a level up in a slightest manner. This session, as I said, that this would be just balancing of the first lecture, so that in totality हमारा 1 hour का session हो जाएगा. So friends, before we wrap up for today, now today's story is of another one of my friend. So going to tell you a story of one of my friend, Swapnil. Okay, so Swapnil happens to be currently is a chartered accountant as well as a lawyer. He is doing extremely good in his career. He is working with one of the very good firms as a lawyer. Now he is working as a tax lawyer to a larger extent. So Swapnil had some very crazy time when he was giving his CA intermediate and CA final examinations. There were several few attempts probably when he was lacking that conviction or lacking that sort of seriousness, or maybe he was just not very much on the right pace. But the best part was that a lot of people had written him off that okay, Swapnil ka bhi dhyan nahi hai, he's not studying, he's taken 2, 3, 4 attempts for some exam, and then that is how people started recording it. But Swapnil himself was consistently aware that okay, he is doing some thing that he should not be doing. Like he's spending some time with which he thought that okay, I now it is high time that I should be done by enjoying my youth and I should really get on to some serious stuff. He got into his studies. He took help of his professors, and he had a good set of professors, amazing guidance, hard work, put together everything in after dropping up a few attempts, he really managed to clear his CA. Thereafter, he managed to clear his law, and he is doing fantastically well today. So, friends, another story again, exceptionally something which is real. There is no creativity in this of my own. I'm telling you all these things not because I'm trying to promote any kind of a part of failure or anything like that. No, please keep it away. I'm absolutely practical when it comes to CA exams, and you need to learn that not everybody is going to be, the first attempt. I am going to also share you first attempt stories. So there is nothing like I have a track record of friends only with these multiple attempts. But we need to understand all the sides of the student's journey in a CA course, and therefore today it was for you, my friend Swapnil story. So friends, on this note, we're going to close for today. Thank you so much. Have a good day ahead. Take care. Jai Hind. And I will see you in the next lecture, which will be first discussing the rules which are associated for the section 16 that we have discussed till now, and some question and answers again specifically from section 16, and then we are going to begin with the provisions of section 17, जहाँ पे हम लोग apportionment of input tax credit. So next lecture will be a 45 minute जिसमें 15 to 20 minutes we'll spend on section 16 rules allied to section 16 and the questions, and half an hour we'll be discussing provisions of section 17.1 to 17.4. So thank you so much. Have a good day ahead or good night ahead. Take care. Bye bye. Jai Hind.